So you finally landed a job on the railroad. Yes! But wait, did you know that there are 9 daily decisions that you can make today that could cost you your job? Stay tuned, because I'm about to break it down to you.
Have you ever felt?
Are you listening? Damn.
There are 9 daily decisions that you can make today that can cost you your job that you've been trying so hard to get. You ready to dive on in? Mistake number 1 that could cost you your job is getting on and off moving equipment. There are a few railroads that will let you get on and off moving equipment. That's Canadian National and maybe Canadian Pacific. As far as BNSF or UP, I doubt it. But getting on and off an engine when it's moving and being seen by a manager doing it could put you on a chopping block about as quick as it is for them to walk you out the door. Do not get on or off moving equipment. Number 2, going in between. So on the railroad, if you guys are already working, you already know what that means. When you need to put together 2 glad hands, or let's say you're making a joint with the knuckles and they didn't make, and you have to align the drawbars so that the 2 joints will come together. Well, in that situation, you're going to ask over the radio or maybe with a hand signal that you need to go in between. If you don't get verbal permission or if you don't tell anyone that you're going in between equipment, that could cost you your job. And if a manager or someone happens to see you do it, you can get walked off the premises immediately. In a lot of railroads, there are cameras all over the yards or wherever they may be. So don't think that you can get away with doing things that could hurt you or get you killed. One of the most serious things that you could do is go in between equipment without letting the engineer know. That engineer needs to let you know that he is set and centered before you can go in between. So number 2, do not go in between moving equipment. Number 3, separation. You need at least 50 feet before you can go in between 2 separated pieces of equipment, also known as being in between a standing cut. If you're going to be working between a standing cut of cars, you need to get verbal permission. Again, either on the radio or with hand signs. If you are caught going in between 2 pieces of equipment without letting the engineer know or asking for a standing cut, you're about as good as done. Always ask permission when you're going in between equipment. Separation 50 feet and letting them know that you're going in between a standing cut of cars. You need that verbal, and that engineer needs to be set and centered again before you can work. Now in this case, if you're working on a standing cut of cars, the engineer does not have to be set and centered, but the engineer does have to know where you are. So when you're asking for a standing cut, you need to let them know what track you're on. If you're working on, let's say, track 30, you need to say a verbal like, Conductor Phillips, or most likely if I'm working in the yard, it'll be Switchman Phillips, is going in between a standing cut of cars on track 30. Once the engineer hears that and the helper, whoever is the helper or the foreman on the job, everyone on the job needs to confirm that they know that you're going to be working in between equipment. And they have to confirm that you're working between a standing cut of cars and what track you're working on. If you go in between equipment without that verbal, you're about as good as done. Rule number 4, riding equipment. If you are caught riding improperly or when permitted, or riding on a piece of equipment that you're not supposed to be riding on, that can be a serious failure. One thing the railroad don't like is when people put themselves or other people at risk. If you're riding on equipment that should not be ridden, you can find yourself out of a job. For example, sometimes you're not always going to be hanging onto a rail car. You might have just a flatbed. Well, there's certain rules to that. Or even on a tank car. A tank car has to have a bar across it with a platform. And there's rules on how you can ride it. You can ride standing on a tank car if you're going forward or in the trailing position. If you're riding on a piece of equipment that's going the wrong way, or you're riding on a piece of equipment that does not properly have secure handrails for you to hold on to, that could be a serious failure and cost you your job. Rule number 5, falling. For example, if you're following a track. Falling a track unnecessarily or without proper precaution. Now, falling a track basically means that you're not in the clearance. A train has to be in a clearance point. If there are multiple tracks, the train needs to be at a point to where another train, if it was to come onto an adjacent track, is not going to sideswipe it or scrape someone off that could be riding. Your train has to be in the clear. So if you're ever caught following a track and not having, they like 150 feet of clearance, that could be an instant way to lose your job. Do not foul tracks nor equipment when working in the yard. Rule number 6, running. Do not run in a performance of duty. Running on the job is a huge no-no. When it comes to the railroad and all the dangers, they do not want to see you running. So, if you're doing any kind of work and you find yourself maybe running, let's say you're pulling pins, what we like to do in my yard is what we call kicking cars. To kick a car, you have to pull up the pin, and the pin will release, and that joint that was made now becomes undone, and we can now put that car in a certain track where we want it. That's called kicking a car. A lot of times you may have to get some speed to keep up with the car so that you can kick it good enough. Well, you might have to, or you might find yourself running to try to pull that pin. Do not run. If you need to, stop the movement and do it again, or pull the pin before the train is in motion. A lot of things that can happen when you're running is that you can run right into a switch or trip over a rail, or just find yourself sliding right underneath one of the rail cars and losing a leg. So running is permitted. Running is not allowed and prohibited. Do not run in the performance of duty. Rule number 7, riding cars to a joint or riding cars to a coupling. You are not to ride on the engine and make a joint with another car. If you are trying to joint or couple 2 cars together, you are supposed to be in the cab area to do it. If you are on the engine, let's say holding on to the rails outside of the cab, and you make a joint and you're not inside sitting down, you could get fired. That is very dangerous, and the railroad does not like it. Now again, these rules may not apply to all the railroads. I believe the CN and the CP being Canadian, they might have their own set of rules, which are a little different. But I know for the BN and even for UP, I really highly doubt they're going to let you ride to a joint. So do not be on the engine when you're coupling two cars together or making a joint. If a manager catches you do that, you better hope you're not walked off the property. Rule number 8, shoving movements. Do not make a shoving movement without the proper protection. And what that means is that when a train is going backwards, that's a shoving movement because the engineer cannot protect it because he can't see what's going on back there, which means that the switchman on duty, the foreman or the helper, needs to watch that shoving movement to make sure that if you're coming up on a crossing, that you're going to stop in time, or to make sure that you're not going to run any switches that aren't lined up correctly. A shoving movement that is unprotected could get you fired. Anytime a shoving movement is made, a switchman's job is to tell the engineer that they are on the ground protecting before that engineer can even move. Rule number 9, horseplay. No horseplay is ever allowed when you're performing duties on the job. Horseplay of any kind can get you canned. If you're on the ground in the yard and you're switching out cars, or even if you're on the engine with a remote, you are not to do any kind of horseplay whatsoever, because that could cause accidents or just become something that could be deadly. So do not have any kind of horseplay when performing your job or when on duty. If you can do all these things, then you're going to keep your job on the railroad. And I really hope you do, because the last thing that you want to see is that you lost your job to break in any one of these 9 rules for being silly or just not taking your job seriously. Question of the day. Have you ever done anything in the performance of duty that almost cost you your job? Your comment will be featured in my next video, and you can be the comment winner. Be a part of the Sticky Web Nation today. Subscribe to my channel by hitting that subscribe button below. Also, don't forget to hit the alert notification so you can be alerted when I'm online, which is quite a bit when I'm doing live videos. If you like this video, don't forget to like it. Until then, I guess I'll see you guys on the rails. Peace.